Hopefully your family wasn't planning on flying to Europe last week. If they were, they may have found themselves stuck on the ground, as flights were cancelled all over the world because of a volcano in Iceland. More than 600,000 passengers were affected, not to mention some Icelandic people who have had to be evacuated from their homes. It wasn't the biggest eruption ever, so why has this volcano caused so much chaos? Sarah found out.
Every day, hundreds of thousands of planes leave European airports, just as they have for decades. Tourists, business people, people going home, all relying on planes to get around. But in the past week, something amazing happened. In the UK and 23 countries across Europe, planes stopped flying. Around the world, flights to Europe were cancelled, and more than 1 million passengers were left stranded.
I want to go home. I just want to go home now. I'm fed up and we have no money to stay out here and I need to rest.
Not even terrorist attacks or hurricanes have caused this much disruption for travellers. So what could be so serious that it almost emptied the sky over a big chunk of Europe? The answer was this: black ash from the icelandvolcano volcano, which is here in the small northern European country of Iceland. It wasn't that big, but it was explosive, reaching up to 6,000 metres in the air, right where planes would be flying. And the wind was blowing the ash right across northern Europe. Flying into a cloud of ash is really dangerous. The tiny particles of rock, sand and glass don't show up on a plane's radar, so they're hard to avoid. If a plane does fly through, the ash can be sucked into its engines. They're hot enough to melt the sand and the glass, but then inside it becomes solid again. That has the potential to seize up the engine and bring a plane down. That nearly happened once when a British airplane flew through a cloud of volcanic ash in the 80s. Luckily, everyone was okay, but airlines weren't going to take any risks, even though the delays are costing them a fortune. For people on the ground in Iceland, it's a disaster. Most people living near the volcano were evacuated straight away, but a few stayed behind as the ash turned day into night. In Iceland, people are pretty used to living with fire under their feet. The country is one of the most volcanically active places in the world, and that's because it sits on something called the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, which is the meeting place of two tectonic plates. We've told you about tectonic plates before. They're the massive slabs of rock that make up the crust of the Earth. We usually think of the ground we stand on as being rock solid, right? Well, guess what? It's not. If you went down far enough, you'd find red-hot molten rock. The thin, cool layer that we live on floats on top. But where tectonic plates meet, the molten rock from under the Earth has a chance to come near the surface. It can create hot mud, geysers, and volcanoes. One of the big dangers from this volcano is the fact it sits under a glacier, a river of ice 250 metres thick. The eruption is melting the ice and causing floods. So how long will it go on? Experts aren't sure, but they do know the last big eruption lasted for more than a year. And there are worries it could trigger an even bigger eruption in a nearby volcano called Katla. So for airlines and for Iceland, there's a nervous wait to see just what nature has in store.